All right, here we go. Welcome to tonight's Right in Our Midst series Author Talk hosted by Washington County Library. This series is provided by the Minnesota Arts and Cultural Heritage Fund. Often referred to as legacy funds, they are distributed to Washington County Library by MELSA, an alliance of metro area public libraries. My name is Leah, and I'm a librarian here at Washington County, and it is my absolute pleasure to introduce tonight's featured guest, Wendy Webb. Often hailed as the Queen of Northern Gothic, Wendy is the accomplished author of several books within that genre. Wendy's first novel, The Tale of Halcyon Crane, won the Minnesota Book Award for Fiction in 2011. Her second novel, The Fate of Mercy Albin, was on the indie bestseller list for 6 weeks. The End of Temperance Dare won the Minnesota Book Award for Genre Fiction in 2017. Daughters of the Lake hit #1 on the Amazon bestseller list. And The Haunting of Bryn Wilder also hit #1 on the Amazon bestseller list. Born and raised in St. Louis Park, Wendy has also lived in France, Washington, D.C., Duluth, and is currently in Minneapolis. Okay, everyone, please join me in welcoming Wendy Webb.
Well, hi, everybody. I am so glad to be here. Thank you so much for having me. This is a thrill. You know, I have to confess something. I said to Leah before things got going, I really love in-person events, but boy, it was sure nice not to have to go anywhere today. So I'm happy to be here doing this on Zoom. As she said, I'm the author of 7 novels of Gothic suspense. They call them Northern Gothic. And they do call me Queen of the Northern Gothic. And I'll just tell you, Queen of anything, I'll take that. I think it's great. And I apparently invented a genre. I didn't know I was doing it. I started writing my first book, The Tale of Halcyon Crane, and I just wrote the book that I wanted to read. And it just happened to have a big old house full of family secrets, kind of dark secrets that bubble to the surface at inconvenient times, a strong heroine trying to make sense of it all, and a little bit of romance, along with a couple of spirits floating in and out, specifically in Halcyon Crane. 3 little, very naughty little girls that are ghosts. And apparently that's the recipe for a Gothic novel. Wasn't really sure about that, but that's what I wrote. And I set it on the Great Lakes because that's where I live. I know my Southern readers love their Southern Gothics. And there's a lot of Gothics set, you know, on the windswept moors in England. But I've set my book in the area that I know and love, and I guess nobody had done that before. So that's where I've continued to set all my books. 5 of them, now I'm saying 5 because my 8th novel is coming out in October, and I'll give you a little sneak peek about that a little later. But so 5 of them are set in the same little fictional town that I created for Daughters of the Lake. And it's a little town on the shores of Lake Superior, a tourist town with a ferry that runs to an island. Buildings are no more than 2 or 3 stories tall, except for the magnificent Queen Anne houses. If any of you have been to Bayfield, you know that's exactly what I'm describing. And fooling no one, I patterned the town on Bayfield. And it's kind of funny. I go up there a lot, and a lot of the shopkeepers know that, and especially the bookstore owners know that I've set these novels in their town, and they get a lot of tourism from people who are coming and wanting to see the real locations. So it's kind of neat. I just, you know, I told the mayor, hey, you know, I should be on the tourism board because I'm bringing a lot of people to your town. So let me talk a little bit about, should I talk about the Metz and Vallow first, Leah? So
Absolutely.
Okay, so here's the cover. It's called The Keepers of Metz and Vallow. And Metsävalo is a word in the Finnish language meaning forest light. And the book is dedicated, if you get the book, you'll notice that it's dedicated to my Finnish ancestors. My mom is 100% Finn, and her grandparents were immigrants. And so I heard a lot about Finnish lore and legend when I was growing up. And I wrote this during the start of the pandemic. And I started thinking about all of that lore and legend that I had heard and thought, what if that was real? What if they weren't just stories? And what would that look like today? And so that's where I got the idea to write this book. And I started crafting a story about a woman who goes home to her grandmother's big old estate to attend the reading of the grandmother's will. And that draws the family there, some of whom love each other and are happy to see each other, and some of whom would really rather not. I'm sure we all can relate to family like that. And they find out a little bit more than they bargained for when the matriarch of the family dies. And a thing that I found really interesting during my research of this is that J.R.R. Tolkien, when he was writing Lord of the Rings, used an ancient Finnish epic poem called the Kalevala for his inspiration. He even learned Finnish to read it in the native language. And that's where he got the idea for, The Hobbit and Lord of the Rings and Gandalf. And, it's all in there. And I thought, if it's good enough for him, it is good enough for me. So I took a lot of that legend of little people, and especially wizards who could control nature and the weather. That's in real life now. The Finns had the Vikings convinced that they could do that. And when the Vikings were on their rampages, pillaging and enslaving people and causing mayhem, they just gave Finland a really wide berth. They sailed around because they really thought that the Finns could control the weather. So I've been trying to get my friends to call me Gandalf. They won't. But so I thought that was really cool, and I worked that into the story too. And the main character is named Annie. She's got a twin brother, Theo, and they together solve this family mystery that has been kind of going on for generations. So that's The Keepers of Metsävalo, and I've gotten a lot of response from people who really, really like it. It's a little bit of a departure. It's a little darker than my some of my other books, but it was a lot of fun to write. Now, when I do these talks, people often ask me, when did you know you wanted to become an author? And how did you know you wanted to become an author? And I will tell you that I've always known that I was going to write books someday. And I think it came from my grandma. And she lived with us when I was growing up, and she would always be the one to read to me. And one summer, she read Little Women to me. And I don't know if any of you have read Little Women. I think you probably have. I was so enthralled with that story, a little, 9 or 10-year-old me. And I was certain that the main character, Jo March, was me. And yes, the book is set in the Civil War, but I was like, I'll deal with that later. This is about me. This book is about me. I was kind of a dark-haired tomboy, and Jo was a dark-haired tomboy, and she was a writer in the book. And I thought, well, since I'm her, I guess I'm a writer too. And I started really identifying as a writer. And then when I got into school, writing was always my favorite subject. And because I thought, well, that's that's what's in me. That's who I am. That's what I'm going to be. That's what I'm going to do with my life. And so I credit um, my grandma and Louisa May Alcott, the author of Little Women, for setting me on my life's path. And I often think, if my grandma hadn't read me that book, where would I be today? And I can tell you with a fair amount of certainty that it wouldn't be sitting here talking to you all, after having written 8 books. So as you can imagine, the book Little Women means a lot to me. And I'll kind of digress and tell you a little story. I had occasion to be out east a few years ago for a wedding. And on the way back to the airport in Boston, we were going right by Concord, where Louisa May Alcott's old family home is. And it's now a museum. And you can go through it. And I thought, I've really got to stop and do this. And so we got there, and they had, there was a tour that was just going to embark, and there was one ticket left on the tour. And so I took it and started going through, and it was me and a group of foreign tourists who did not speak English. So they had an interpreter, and the guide was taking us all around the house, and she set Little Women in her own home. And so after having read that so many times, I thought, oh, I know this living room, and here's the kitchen. And, it was really kind of emotional. And we went upstairs and went into Louisa's bedroom. And there was this little desk right by the window overlooking this big stand of trees. And the guide said, and here is where Louisa May Alcott wrote Little Women. And I started bawling, and not just like a pretty little, no, I was weeping, just, and I noticed as a group, my tour mates just kind of took a few steps away and were looking at me like, who is this crazy lady? And why is she bawling? But the tour guide knew. She looked at me and she said, let me guess, you're an author. And I said, yes. And she said, yeah, we get a lot of that here. So I guess I'm not the only one who identified as Jo March, and I'm not the only one who read Little Women as a child and then grew up to be an author. So so that's my origin story, I guess you'd call it. But I didn't jump into writing books right away. When I was younger, I had a family, and that keeps you a little busy, but I have always been a journalist. So that's how I've made my living for my whole career. But once my son stopped thinking I was cool and didn't need me hovering around him all the time, I had time, and that's when I sat down and started writing The Tale of Halcyon Crane. And I can give you a little background into how I got the idea for that book. I took a trip to Mackinac Island, and I don't know if anybody has been to Mackinac Island, but it is one of the most beautiful and creepy places I've ever been. You may or may not know that no cars are allowed on the island. So you leave your car on the mainland, take a ferry over, and then people get everywhere by horse and carriage. And there are beautiful old mansions turned into inns. You probably have seen or known of the Grand Hotel, which has been in 1,000 movies, but one of my favorites was Somewhere in Time. And that's there. You can, go there. And but when we were on the ferry, it kind of turns, and then you can see the island. And there on a kind of on a bluff, I guess you'd say, is a line of gorgeous Victorian homes. And one of them was this yellow house with a huge wraparound porch and turrets. And I was just enthralled with that yellow house. And I thought, that's where I'm going to set my book. my character is going to live in that yellow house. And during the course of the vacation on the island, I learned that everything's haunted there. Every place has a story. Every place has got a ghost. And I thought, you know what, this is going to be a ghost story, and it's going to be set in that yellow house. But I didn't have a plot. So we went home, kind of went about my daily life. And what I would do back then, my routine was I'd walk my young son to school. And when I did that, I'd take my dog. I had a big Malamute at the time. And so I'd drop my son off, and then I'd take my dog for her morning walk. This is in Duluth, where I lived. And there, a lot of people would walk at that time of day. So I'd see the same people all the time, you know, the morning walkers. And everybody was so nice, except for this one woman who really annoyed me because she would never say hello. She just walked by me. I'd always say hello. She'd just keep on going. She would never even acknowledge that I was there. And it really started to annoy me. And on this particular day, it was really foggy. And the fog just kind of just comes in Duluth. And I was halfway through my walk, and it just fog was all around, and it was kind of creepy. It seemed like everybody had, you know, wind chimes, and they were just tinkling. And it's like, oh, this is just kind of creepy. And sure enough, out of the fog, this woman comes walking toward me. And I said to myself, today's the day, lady. You are gonna say hello to me. It was like this quest that I had. And as she was coming toward me, I was going to, you know, I was getting ready to say, hey, hello, how are you? But I didn't get a chance to do that, because as she passed me, she kind of snapped her head toward me and said, something's coming. And then just, yeah, I know. And then just walked off and disappeared into the fog. And I looked down at my dog, and I was like, what kind of weird harbinger of doom was that? And I had myself worked up into a frenzy. It's like, something's coming. What is coming? And by the time I got home, I was sure that I was going to get bad news in the mail. That was it. Something's coming. She predicted it. Weird harbinger of doom. And so I waited for my mailman, who I knew. And I like accosted him, and, you know, what is the mail? And he's like, here, Wendy, here's your mail. And there was nothing in there. It was just, you know, bills, you know, junk mail. But it got me thinking. You know, I started thinking, what could be so bad that would come in the mail? And what, you know, what could possibly arrive that would turn my life upside down? And the switch just flipped. And I sat down, opened up my computer, and started writing The Tale of Halcyon Crane. It starts with Halcyon getting very bad news in the mail. That is something that changes her life and sets her on this path to find out who her mother was. And that's the whole basis of the story. Now, a little side note to that. When in the first version of that book, I had Halcyon encountering this strange woman and having the strange woman say something's coming, and like it really happened to me. And my editor said, oh, Wendy, you know what? That is just so unbelievable. People aren't going to buy that. You got to take that out. And I thought, okay, that's the only real thing in the whole book. That's the only truth, but that's too unbelievable. Now, 3 little, you know, 7-year-old ghosts who wreak havoc, fine. But the creepy lady, I had to take out. And since that was my first book, I did take it out. I thought, okay, you know what? If she wants me to take it out, I'm taking it out. But I always tell that story at readings, because I wish I would have left it in. So I see we're just about at halftime and I've been yakking. Does anybody have any questions?
You can unmute yourself and ask your questions, or you can put them in the chat and I'll read them to Wendy and the group if you'd like.
Say, Wendy, did you get a chance to go into that yellow house that you saw and tour it or anything?
No, it's a private home. But they do, you can take a tour, a horse and carriage tour, and it's really neat. You can bring a bottle of wine and it's just really cool. And they take you around and tell you, about all the houses. So I got to go by it really closely, but I never did go in, but I'd love to know who owns it. And I'd love for them to know that that was the inspiration that started my whole career, made my dreams come true.
Now, don't you think you could put Something's Coming in another book?
Oh, that's a really good idea.
Yeah, I think you could. I like that.
You know what? That's a really good idea. Why has that not occurred to me in 10 years? But that's a really good idea. I could indeed put that in. It's just the neatest story, and it really did happen just like that. And the one of the creepy parts of it is that I never saw that lady again. So I don't know.
I have a question. So The Vanishing was actually my favorite just because of all the Easter eggs you put in there. And literally like the last paragraph, my jaw dropped. I'm like, oh my gosh, this was fantastic. I'm just curious if you are going to eventually write something similar to that it built up, and I died for that last page of the book.
You know what? That wasn't originally in there. When I gave my manuscript to my agent, she's always my first. She's really the only one. I know a lot of writers who belong to kind of writing groups and they let people read it. I don't. I write the book that I have in my heart, I guess you'd say. And then the first person who reads it is my agent. And she said she loved it. She went crazy for it. But then she said, what if you put a creepy ending on there? Like a creepy epilogue. And so I thought, cool. And I sat down, I wrote that in like 5 minutes. And I was changing publishers for that one. And they bought it on the strength of that ending.
That's amazing.
Yeah, and I would like to write another, that if any of you haven't read The Vanishing, that, and you'd probably agree with me, that's more psychological suspense than any of my other books. And I didn't really set out to have it be that way. That's how it came out. But the big twist, which I won't reveal, I didn't know that was coming. And I wrote it and it's like, oh, people are gonna like this. So yeah, I would like to I would like to revisit that. And Something's Coming would be a great title. I just saw that in the chat. But thank you. And a little side note on The Vanishing too. My son was going out to visit his dad around the time that you get galleys or advanced reader copies of books, and when I was for The Vanishing, and so I gave it to him and said, hey, read this on the plane. And he got off the plane and called me immediately and said, Mom, that scene in the library, what is wrong with you? So he's like, what is my mother thinking? Because that was scary.
I have to say, The Vanishing is my favorite too. But
Oh, it is?
I know how long it takes me to read one of your books, which is I just have to clear my schedule. It just sort of, you just can't do anything else when it gets to a certain point.
Oh, thank you.
It's really fun. How long does it take you to write a book?
Well, I can answer that question and then admit something to you. The answer is it would take me about 8 weeks. And the only reason I know that is because when I was writing The Haunting of Bryn Wilder, which is not my most recent, but just before that, I was procrastinating and procrastinating and procrastinating. And my agent called and said, "Hey, how's that book coming? How's the manuscript coming?" And I said, "Great." And I had like 10,000 words written, and my books are about 100,000 words. And she said, "Good, because it's due at the end of the month." And that was like 2 weeks away. And I went, do you think they'd extend the deadline for a month? I'm just about done, but I really want to wrap things up. And then I cleared my schedule and I sat down, and day in, day out, 8 hours a day, I was banging that sucker out. So, and you know what? I love that. It turned out great. And so what I've learned is if I have too much time, I just meander, and it's, but if I write constantly, then it has that sense of urgency. And another thing about it is that I don't outline anything. I never know what's coming. I start with a place, and then I start with a main character, like who would go to this place, and what might she be dealing with. And I have like a general idea of maybe my character's backstory, like what brought her to the time the book starts. That's it. And so I write it like you read it. And for me, it's so much fun. It's just the best to just have it unfold at the keyboard. Now, I know you guys are probably familiar with William Kent Krueger, who's another very accomplished Minnesota author, and he's a pal of mine. And we were talking about outlining, and he writes very detailed outlines. And he said, and I said, why do you do that? And he said, well, then I don't have to worry about the story. I just can concentrate on my writing. And I thought, well, if it's good enough for Kent, I'm going to try it. And I outlined, it was, to me, it was like I'm back in high school again, outlining, a term paper. But I did it. And then I started writing it, and I was not interested anymore. So I had to just throw that out and start anew. But there is one other caveat, and there was something in the end of Temperance Dare that I had in my mind from the beginning, like something I won't reveal what it is, but something I've always wanted to do in a book, and I never had. And I thought, oh, okay, this is going to be cool. I'm going to do it in this book. And so I got to that part and I wrote it, and I thought, oh, people are going to be so surprised. Yeah, I've heard from so many readers who said, I saw that coming a mile away. So if I don't know, then you won't know, and it'll be more fun for all of us. Anybody else?
I have a question. So I noticed that in The Keepers of Metzon Vallow, you had a white German Shepherd in there, and you have a white German Shepherd. So are there other parts of your personal life that you incorporate into your books?
Yes. I've put all my dogs into my books. So if you ever come upon a dog in one of my books, it is one of my dogs. In fact, in the new book, there's a white dog also that makes an appearance, and that's my dog Frosty. But I will confess that The Haunting of Bryn Wilder is all about me. You know, I had to write it so fast. There are, and it was a very emotional book for me to write. I don't know if anybody's read it yet, but the main character is dealing with the aftermath of the death of her mother. And I was dealing with the aftermath of the death of my mom. And there are scenes in there that are from the mother's deathbed. Those all really happened to me. And I was going through a really hard time and kind of lonely, and I had broken up with the relationship I thought was going to last forever. Didn't. I met someone and started dating, and he just brought the smile back to my face. You know, I was so grieving and I met him, and he was just so funny and so charismatic. He's the love interest in The Haunting of Bryn Wilder, and even to the point of, I call him in real life the Illustrated Man. And I call him that because he has a lot of tattoos. Now, if you know me, you will think, Wendy, why are you dating somebody who has a lot of tattoos? That's just not in my DNA. And so much so that I used to joke with my son. I teased him mercilessly when he was growing up. And I said, okay, never bring a girl home who chews gum. I was just kidding about all this stuff. And never bring a girl home who has any visible tattoos. So now I have no credibility because my man is covered in tattoos, and I call him the Illustrated Man. And the character in this book is called the Illustrated Man. So a lot of it, and then the subplot too. It takes place in a boarding house in my little town of Wharton. That's really Grunke's Inn, if you have been to Bayfield and you know what that is, but it's set there. And a couple of the other summer lodgers have took in the ex-wife of one of them who was suffering from early onset Alzheimer's. And that really happened to me too. My neighbors took in one of their ex-wives, and Alice was her name, or no, that's the character's name. Lucy was her name in real life. And I got to know her really well over a summer. And it was just the most beautiful act of love, you know, this married couple taking in the ex, so she wouldn't have to go into a nursing home. She was only all of about 65. And so her ex-husband didn't want her to go into a nursing home, and they took her in. And I thought it was just so beautiful. I asked them, you know, I said, can I put this in my book? And they gave me their blessing. And in fact, I had sent one of the guys' names is Bert, and I sent Bert an advanced copy, and he called me, and he was just bawling. And he said, I am laying on the beach in Puerto Vallarta, Mexico, bawling like a baby, and everybody thinks I'm a crazy man right now. And I'm crying because I just read your book, and thank you. So, and that book really generated a lot of response from people who had been caring for a spouse who had dementia or Alzheimer's, and I would cry every day when I'd get letters from readers saying, thank you. It was such a beautiful way that you treated this. And so I was bawling. I was bawling the whole time I was writing it. I did a lot of the writing on my back deck and crying, and my neighbors would kind of look and go, Wendy, are you okay? It's like, yes, I'm just writing. And And then I cried after it came out, and then I cried when I got letters from readers. So there's a whole lot of crying going on with that book. So yes, that is the long answer to, yeah, I put a lot of stuff from my own life in my books.
Anybody else have a question? Remember, you can put it in the chat too, if you're shy and don't want to talk on the microphone.
Wendy, who would your ideal reader be? It sounds like that it goes from one side to the other. Do you have a certain person in mind when you're writing?
When I wrote my first book, I didn't, because I didn't have any readers yet. And I just wrote the type of book that I would want to read. And I still do that to a certain extent. But now, I've traveled the country with every book except for my last two, obviously. And I met so many readers that I feel a great responsibility, because now I can put faces, they're not just readers, they're, people who love my books. And so what I do is I try to be very respectful of my readers when I'm writing. So I don't have like an ideal reader, but I don't put a whole lot of, or even any strong language in my books. There's no sex in any of my books. There's a like fade to black kind of thing, but I don't have any kind of sex in my books. At first it was like, well, my parents are still alive, so I'm not doing that. But now I don't think my readers want it. I do have a lot of young adult readers, so I try to be really respectful of that. And I really do take people's comments about what they like it to heart. Like, I'm gonna leave this thinking, The Vanishing. Maybe I should, write a little something more along those lines. So I really do feel a great responsibility and have a great respect for all my readers.
Thank you.
Hi, Wendy. I'm wondering if you could tell us a little bit about the process of how you found an agent and like published your first book, kind of how you transitioned into it from a different career.
Well, I have to tell you that it was a long slog through hell. Agents are looking for a reason to say no. So what you need to do is they all have their certain guidelines, and you need to follow a submission guideline. So it's not just about the book, but it's about how you submit the book. Some want 3 chapters, some want the whole thing, some want, just a description. And so the first thing that I tell people is that they have to follow their submission guidelines to the letter. Otherwise, they'll throw it up. And the second thing is, and the most important thing is to try to find an agent that has already represented a book sort of like yours that was successful. Because they want, if they've succeeded with one book, they want kind of more like that. I submitted to probably 50 agents. And they all were trying to find a reason to say no, except for the one who couldn't say no. And she's still my agent. She's now one of my best friends. She's my first reader. I owe her everything, but it was tough. I mean, writing the book, that wasn't so tough, but finding the agent was. And then once you get the agent, then they start submitting your book to publishers, and the publishers are all looking for a reason to say no. But I will tell you something. It took a year for her to sell The Tale of Halcyon Crane. And that was, oh my God, that was an just agonizing year because I'd get so close with the publisher and then they'd turn it down. And it, you know, I would cry and it was like, oh man, is this never going to happen? And it did happen. And then I was up for the Minnesota Book Award for that book. And I knew how big the book awards are here, you know, in Minnesota and in the Midwest, but I didn't know how big they are everywhere. And my agent live tweeted the ceremony and I won. And so then, you know, she had publishers coming to her saying, hey, we want to take a look at her next book here. And so I was almost done with it and I sent it to her. And 3 days later, I got a message from her saying, hey, call me. And I thought, oh, maybe the file didn't come through. Maybe she's got questions about the book. No. In 3 days, the book was in a bidding war and with 4 or 5 publishers, and it sold for a ridiculous amount of money. That changed my life. And I really credit the Minnesota Book Award for that.
Oop. All right, we have a chat question. Hi, Wendy. I really enjoy your books. Sorry, I had technical difficulties on my end and got into Zoom late, so I apologize if someone has already asked this already. Can I ask about the truth about Drew McCullough in The Vanishing? Was he really the immortal Scottish nobleman who built Havenwood, or the ghost of the nobleman, or the reincarnation of him? I hope it's okay to ask this, but perhaps you'll say it's up to the reader to decide.
Let me just say yes to that question, and let the reader decide, but I did have a very specific idea in my mind about that. And I kind of imagined that area as sort of being a kind of taken out of time, let's just say. So yeah. Oh, Drew, I love Drew. I miss Drew. I fall in love with all the guys in my books. So
All right, I have another question. So have you had any paranormal experiences yourself?
yes, I have. And I'll tell you a couple. You know, I feel like since now the paranormal, that's not the basis of my books, but it's part of it. And I feel like since I kind of delve into that, either I'm noticing stuff more, or I don't know, weird stuff happens to me. And I will tell you my favorite ghost story, and then if we have time, I'll tell you one that just happened. So my favorite ghost story that happened to me, I was living in Duluth. I had a 130-pound Malamute named Tundra, who I've put in, who I think I put her in The Vanishing, actually. I was walking her after a big snowfall. It had snowed like 2 feet, and then the temperature dropped, you know, as it does at the day after a big snowfall. So it's like 10 below zero. And I was all bundled up, and I took her out, and I was walking in my neighborhood, which was the East Hillside in Duluth. And there's a lot of huge old mansions there. And I would always walk Tundra at around 10 o'clock in the morning because everybody had gone to school or work. Nobody else was walking their dogs. You know, I got this 130-pound Malamute who's twice the size of a timber wolf. And I just preferred not to encounter any other dogs when I was walking her. And so we were going along and I started hearing this weird creaking noise, just kind of like this. Eh, 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 eh. And I couldn't figure out what it was. And I rounded the corner, and in the backyard of one of these big old mansions, there was an old decrepit swing set. On the swing was a little girl. And I'm getting goosebumps now. This is honest to God truth. She was on the swing, kind of swinging back and forth and back and forth. And that's what was making the creaking sound. Strange thing about that is she was dressed in a brownie uniform. Just a little cotton dress, nothing, short sleeve, nothing on her arms, nothing on her legs, the little shoes. And the first thing I thought of was, first, how come this kid's not in school? It's 10 o'clock in the morning. And then I thought, it's 10 below zero. What is she doing outside without a coat and snow pants on? So we got closer and I was going to yell out to her, hey kid, you better get back inside now. Where are your parents? What are you doing? Again, I didn't get a chance to do that because I just happened to glance down and I saw the fur stand up on Tundra's back. And she hunkered down and she started barking at this girl. Now, if you know anything about Malamutes, you know that they don't bark very often. They'll howl and kind of talk to you in just an adorable way, but barking is reserved for very dangerous situations. And she started barking, and if you can imagine a 130-pound animal, sound is very loud. And that girl did not look up. She just kept swinging back and forth on the swing. And Tundra then stopped barking, looked up at me, pulled me away from that house. There was no way that she was going to let me stay there anymore. And the thing that I thought of, I didn't think of it at the time, but days later, I was at a cocktail party. I was the editor of a magazine at the time. And my assistant editor said, oh, Wendy, tell them about that little girl, tell them what you saw the other day. And so I told the story, and then it hit me. The thing that Tundra barked at all the time were things that looked like they were alive, but weren't. Like, my neighbors had a Mr. and Mrs. Scarecrow that they put out in their yard every Halloween. Tundra hated Mr. and Mrs. Scarecrow. She tried to attack Mr. and Mrs. Scarecrow. Even snowmen. She once attacked a snowman. Bark, 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 and attacked a snowman. It was like the horror version of, if you saw that magical book about a deer coming upon a snowman and the snowy, mine was the horror version of that. Because Tundra just went after the snowman. But it's like, she didn't like things that looked like they were alive, but weren't. So that is my, and I will leave it to you. I don't know if it was a ghost, but my dog sure thought so.
So did she disappear while you were watching?
She didn't disappear, but I never did see her again. I wanted to, like, but what am I going to go up to the house and go say, do you have a little girl living here? It's like, I get all the way. So I didn't, but Tundra would never go down that block again. So we couldn't go down the block, but we could go in front of the house. And I never did see that little girl again. So I don't know, but I get goosebumps every time I tell that story. And I do have another one that's kind of, it's more funny, it's creepy, and I don't know what to think about it either, but things happen when I walk the dog, and specifically in winter. I don't know why, but this was down in Minneapolis, and I was walking her again on a winter morning, and it was completely desolate. Nobody was out. It was just she and I. I'm walking up the block and I see this black thing rolling across the road. And I got closer and it wasn't windy. I'll just say this right now. It was not a windy day. It was just dead calm. This thing is rolling across the road. And I looked and it was a black balloon. And I just thought, well, that's kind of creepy, you know, a black balloon crossing my path. And it kind of just rolled along and I just kept on walking. And about 30 minutes later, I'm coming around the block, coming up to there's stairs leading from the sidewalk up to my house, which is on a hill. And what is sitting at the foot of the stairs but the black balloon? And I had my camera with me. I took a picture of it and I put it, I went upstairs and I put it on Facebook and said, you are never going to believe. And it's like, I don't know what it means, but that black balloon, we were 2 blocks away from my house. Yet that black balloon was waiting for me when I got home. So these are the kinds of things that happen to me on a regular basis. And I'll tell you one more too. We do have a little bit of time. The house I'm sitting in now, I bought a year ago in August. So, you know, wisely moved during the pandemic. But I found this house and I just love it. It's just off Minnehaha Creek in Minneapolis. And it's about a 90-year-old house. And the kitchen is really small and there's a cabinet. It's, you know, the kitchen is here and then there's stairs going down into the basement. And at the top of the stairs, there's this built-in cabinet that's original. And in that cabinet, I have all my not utensils, but, you know, spatulas and, you know, kitchen items. And one of the things in there are 2 glass salt and pepper shakers, the kind of old fashioned ones that you might see in a diner. You know, they're glass and have a silver top. And these have decorations on them. A friend of mine got them for me at the Renaissance Festival. And they're way in the back of that cabinet. And so one day I wake up, I'm letting the dogs out and I look down the stairs. And what's laying down at the bottom of the stairs on the concrete floor is one of those salt and pepper shakers. It was in the back of the cabinet. The cabinet doors were closed. It's glass, so if it fell out of the cabinet, it would have shattered. Yet it somehow made it all the way down to the bottom of the stairs, and it was just kind of laid out there. And I don't know what that means either, but it didn't scare me. It almost seemed like maybe a message from my brother who passed away in 2004 saying, love the house. It didn't scare me, but it just made me think, you know, what does my life become? These kinds of things happen to me all the time. So yes. Now it's getting late. I was going to read a little bit of my new, should I still do that, Leah? Okay.
Absolutely.
My newest book is coming out in October. It's called The Stroke of Winter. I'll read a little bit, just a short bit, and then I'll give you a sneak peek of the cover. It's set in my little town of Wharton, and a woman is renovating her old family home into a bed and breakfast inn. And she, during the renovation, there's always a wing of the house that has been shuttered up and nobody ever talked about it, nobody ever went in there. But she's like, well, I'm renovating, I'm going to open it, you know, so she gets somebody to help open up the doors. And she finds that it's an artist studio. Her grandfather was a very famous painter and a world-renowned, paintings go for millions of dollars. And in the studio, which is in total disarray, like somebody just ran out of there and locked the doors. She finds some paintings that the world has never seen. And she starts looking at them, but they don't really look like the typical paintings her grandfather painted. They look to be the work of somebody who was slipping into madness. So that's the premise. And I'll read just a little bit of the prologue, because you read my books, I love me a prologue. So here's this one. The painter awakened, his head pounding. This is the first time I've read this. I mean, nobody's heard this before. He was sprawled out on the floor of his studio, his clothes a damp tangle around him, a paintbrush still clutched in his hand. He pushed himself up into a sitting position and rubbed his bleary eyes, the room coming into focus. A ray of hazy, dusty sunshine was streaming in through the window panes. An empty bottle of wine lay on its side, a broken glass next to it. The wooden floor was splotched with paint, the colors blending into a mosaic. What in the world? He stared at the paintbrush in his hand, turning it around slowly, red streaked with black. He dropped it as though it were on fire. He scrambled to his feet and whirled around. What was this? How did he get in here? Why was he here? He didn't remember coming into the studio. He wouldn't have, not after what had happened. He was done with painting. He had made that clear to himself. But yet, here he was. He ran a hand through his hair, straining to reach back in his mind to piece together the previous day. There was lunch with his friend at the boat club in Salmon Bay. Yes, he remembered that. The drive back to Wharton. Twists and turns on the road. Then what? He'd read a book on the porch that afternoon, hadn't he? Opened a bottle of wine. Yes, it was coming back to him now. It had been a nice day. But what of dinner? What of the evening? It was all a blank, a great empty void. He groaned as his head pounded on. Aspirin. He needed aspirin. His mouth felt and tasted like... Why did I write this? His mouth felt and tasted like a hamster had died in there. He crossed the room to pour a glass of wine from the pitcher on the counter, his hands shaking. That's when he saw the canvases, 4 of them. Could he possibly have painted all of those in one night? It couldn't be. He squinted to get a better look, his stomach seized up into knots as he slowly walked closer, one short, slow step after another. He felt like he was walking through quicksand. As he focused on the paintings, his eyes grew wide when he realized what he was seeing. The horror of it hit him like a wave from an icy lake. What had he done? Oh no, dear God, no. So that's the prologue to the book. And I am going to give you a sneak peek of the cover. Let's see if I can do it here. We just decided on it. Let's see. Can you see that? I love it. And it's the doors open and there's the studio in there. And I think it looks great. So
I love a good sneak peek. Love a good sneak peek. So thank you for giving that to us.
Oh, sure. I'm really excited about this one. It's spooky and I think people are gonna like it.
I'm stoked. I have yet to meet a Wendy Webb book that I dislike. So
Oh, thank you.
all right, everybody. Well, given the time, that concludes our Write and Mist virtual author talk this evening. Firstly, I want to thank Wendy for presenting to us tonight. And I want to thank all of you, our audience, for joining us and participating. And right now, I just want to give a quick plug to the next author to talk in our series. It will be the final one of the series. And we will be with the author of How the Streets Were Made, Housing Segregation and Black Life in America. Yelena Bailey will be with us on February 24th at 7 p.m. And registration is required, just like as with this one. And that is that. Thank
I
you
just-
so much. Wendy.
Can I just say something quick? Thank
Absolutely.
you so much, Wendy. I loved your happy personality.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
Alrighty, Britt. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Wendy. And
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Thanks.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
bye.